Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rano, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Type 63 HG90. This is the latest Cold War premium tank to enter World of Tanks console, and it is a tank. It's an Era to Eastern Alliance premium light tank, and it's very similar to the Type 63 HG, which is an Era to Eastern Alliance tech tree tank. So we'll be having a look at this premium compared to its tech tree counterpart, as well as comparing it to another of the Eastern Alliance Era 2 premium light tanks. I'll be showing you my commander and equipment setup in just a little bit, and then I have 3 gameplays for you to see how this tank performs. But before we get stuck into the stats and the comparisons and the gameplay, I'll scroll down here, show you what this tank looks like, and yes, it is very boaty. It's got the boat-shaped hull. It looks like it won't have very much gun depression, and spoiler alert, it doesn't. But it is extremely quick, very mobile. It's kind of unique, I guess, and I'll be telling you my thoughts throughout this video. But we're going to have a look down here, and you can see that it does have a skin called the Water Dragon skin, which you can get with the primed bundle, which is the most expensive bundle, or you can buy the base bundle and buy it in the appearances tab, which I believe is now 3,000 gold for this skin, which I think looks pretty cool with the sort of fish netting on there on the front. But we're going to scroll down and have a look at the cost of this tank, and yes, it is a very expensive tank if you are going for the primed or the fully loaded bundle. Both of these bundles, or all 3 of these bundles I should say, including the base version with just the tank, are available from August 2nd, which is 2 days ago as this video is going out. The Prime Bundle, 18,750 gold, which is an absolute whopping price to pay, especially when there are so many sales going on for the Wargaming anniversary at the moment. Of course, you do get some equipment and boosters and that skin with the Prime bundle. If you go for the fully loaded, you get some premium time and some boosters for 17,000 gold, and if you want the tank on its own, it's 12,940. So yeah, just 60 gold shy of 13,000 gold, and a very expensive tank, and you're going to be hoping it's very competitive for that price. And unfortunately, I don't have fantastic news for you, although it may appeal to some players out there, and I'll talk you through why in this video. But yeah, 12,940 gold just for the tank alone, which you can get as of now, is a very expensive price, so you're going to have to think long and hard whether you want this tank. But we're going to head over here to this Excel spreadsheet and have a look at the stats of the Type 63 HG90 and compare to the Type 63 HG, which is the tech tree counterpart. So for the moment, we're going to ignore the bonuses on the Type 63 HG90, and we'll compare them with the other tanks, or the other premium light tank I'm going to be comparing it to, which is the Object 934 in just a little bit. But first we'll get stuck straight into the hit points of this vehicle compared to the tech tree counterpart. It has 2,400 hit points, which is 50 more than the tech tree counterpart, and it does have the same 550 meters of U range, which is pretty nice, and the extra hit points is also good as well. Mobility wise, it does have the exact same horsepower engine, the exact same power to weight and forward speed, but it does change slightly in terms of its reverse speed and its traverse speed. So you get a 580 horsepower engine, a 26.09 power to weight ratio, which is very, very nice. You have a top speed of 77.2 kilometers an hour forwards, 30.6 kilometers an hour in reverse, which is also very, very nice. And you have a hull and turret traverse of 40 degrees a second. And if we compare that to the tech tree counterpart, you'll see that yes, the engine power is the same, as is the power to weight and the top forward speeds. However, the reverse speed on the tech tree counterpart is just 0.6 less, so not a massive difference, and it does have 2 degrees a second less hull traverse, but it has the same turret traverse. So yeah, very minimal differences, and I'm not a massive fan of bringing out the sort of premium versions of the tech tree tank. There's so many of them now in the game. I would like it to be a bit more original, but for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna, remain neutral until we've talk about whether I think this tank is worth it or not. So As it is a premium version of the Tech Tree tank, you would expect it to have the same gun, and it does. It has the exact same 105mm, which fires APF SDS as standard, heat as its premium option, and HE as its third ammunition choice. The speed on the standard APF SDS rounds is 1455 meters a second, making this very nice for shooting at targets at mid to long ranges in terms of your lead. However, you will get some penetration drop off, and if you choose to fire the heat rounds, you get 1173 meters a second, which is very fast for a heat round. And if you fire heat at mid to long ranges, you won't lose any penetration, and that 468 millimeters of penetration, which we'll discuss in just a second, is quite nice to have on a Era 2 premium tank, and you should still make some pretty good silver. In terms of the shell velocity on the HE round, it's 850. It does have very good penetration, or very usable penetration I should say, if you choose the right targets. However, 850 meters a second, it's only going to be really useful up close and when you know what you're going to be shooting at. So what alpha damage do you get on this 105mm gun? You get 460 alpha damage on your standard and premium rounds, and 570 alpha damage with those 210mm of penetration HE rounds. Penetration on the standard rounds is 370, which isn't too bad. It's not the best, but it is usable, and 460mm on the heat is very nice, but you do have to aim for those spots that don't have any of the explosive reactive armor and the composite armor or the spaced armor or the tracks, and just go for flat armor or just base armor where there isn't any spaced armor over the top of it. You'll learn it's usually the cupolas, some parts of the turret, sort of the engine decks, some lower plates, that kind of thing. But for the most part, in Era 2 and 3 of Cold War, there's a lot of spaced armor, and heat rounds can be very difficult to use. But yeah, the penetration, not too bad. The 210 is very nice if you're shooting at some of the Leopards or some of the light tanks. You can boost your DPM up quite nicely. And now we're going to get on to the gun handling of this 105mm gun. So for the premium version, it's 1.9 second aim time, 0.32 accuracy. You get a DPM of 3,491.4, which means that you have a base reload of 7.9 seconds. You carry 55 rounds of ammunition, 5 degrees of gun depression, which is absolutely god-awful, and this can be extremely frustrating to use on many ridgelands in the game, but you do get a respectable 20 degrees of gun elevation. So comparing this to the Tech Tree Type 63 HD in terms of its gun handling, you have a better gun aim time by 0.1 second, a better accuracy by 0.02, you have a worse DPM by about 0.2 seconds on your reload. You carry the same amount of ammunition as the Tech Tree tank, same gun depression and same gun elevation. So if you're looking for the DPM, then you'd be choosing the Tech Tree. But if you wanted to choose between these two for some reason and you didn't want to grind out this tank and you just wanted to buy the premium, then the better gun handling goes to the premium tank, the better hit points and the better reverse speed by a little bit and whole traverse. So now we're going to pop over here quickly and have a look at the Type 63 HG90, so the premium tank, the Type 63 HG, the Tech Tree tank, compared to the Object 934, which is an Era 2 Eastern Alliance premium tank. And we're going to have a look at these tanks compared to each other. So as you can see here, I've color coded it so green is the best, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between. So we've already had a look at the first two tanks compared to each other, but now we're going to have a look at the Type 63 HG90 compared to the Object 934. So right off the bat, you'll see here that the hit points, 2,400 hit points, is 100 more than the Object 934. You also get 5 meters more view range. It's all green here, apart from the whole traverse here for the mobility. So everything apart from the whole traverse is better on the Type 63 HG90, and the Object 934 has 2 degrees a second more on the whole traverse. But of course, you can choose to use mobility equipment on the Type 63 HG90. So hit points, view range and mobility all go to the Type 63 HG90 compared to the Object 934 at the moment. And then you come on to the guns, so they all have 105mm guns. The Type 63 HG90 has 20 more alpha damage at 460, but the Object 934 can fire ATGMs as its third ammunition choice, so you do have very nice penetration of 480mm on those ATGMs and the alpha damage of 870. Of course, the Object 934 doesn't use multiple weapon system like some, or quite a few of the Era 2 premium light tanks, which I'll talk about in a little bit, so it's more comparable to the Type 63 than some of the other premium tanks. But as you can see here, the shell velocity on the standard and the premium is going to be better than the Object 934, as well as the HE rounds that you can use on the Type 63. They're definitely going to be better than the ATGMs, which have very, very slow shell velocity at 186 meters a second on the Object 934. So I think that if you're not a very big fan of ATGMs and you aren't fantastic with leading your targets, then this gun's going to be better for you on the Type 63 compared to the Object 934 if you are solely comparing these two tanks. But there are plenty of other options we're going to talk through as I talk through the gameplays. So in terms of the gun handling, the Type 63 is better in terms of its aim time. It doesn't have as good accuracy by 0.02 compared to the Object 934, so that does have the best accuracy in this comparison. But the Object 934 does have the worst DPM, obviously the worst base reload because of that. It carries less ammunition, has the same awful 5 degrees of gun depression and 5 degrees of less of gun elevation. So all in all, I'd say the gun on the Type 63 HG90 is better than the Object 934. And if you're comparing just these two tanks, then obviously the Type 63 is probably the one to go to. We're going to head over back here now, have a look at my commander and equipment setup and how it's affected the statistics of the Type 63 HG90. But first I'll talk you through the bonuses that this tank has. On your XP bonus you get 10%, on your commander XP you have 10%, and on your silver bonus you have a 65% silver bonus, which is best in class, and it is very, very nice. It makes a lot of silver even if you have fairly mediocre games. And I found that this tank for me personally is consistent. It's not amazing. You probably can have some pretty damn good games in it, but it's going to be consistently good for making silver, but it's definitely not as powerful as some tanks out there, and I'll talk you through which tanks that are when we're looking at the gameplay of this tank. So what equipment and commander skills do I run on the Type 63 HG90? Well, in terms of my equipment, I run Advanced Concealment, Advanced Powertrain and Traction System, and on my commander I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Camouflage Expertise and Muffled Shot. And why have I gone for this setup? So in terms of the equipment, it was a bit of a dilemma for me. I've chosen to use both of the pieces of mobility equipment because I feel that that's the unique selling point of this tank. That's why you're going to be wanting to get this tank, because you want to push that as much as it can go. And in terms of the concealment, I've added the concealment in because it does have fairly nice still concealment. With my commander and equipment setup, I now have a still concealment rating of 166 meters, which is very nice indeed, meaning that even though you are a relatively large profile, very big boat-shaped hull, compared to a lot of the other Era 2 light tanks, you can sneak up on your opponents and get some good assistance in and get your damage numbers up that way. And in terms of my commander skills, I've gone for gun handling skills to help the gun handling on the move, because it can feel a little bit derpy on the move. I'm guessing the moving dispersion isn't that great. So with my commander and equipment setup, the aim time has dropped to 1.82 seconds. My accuracy is now 0.27, and it can still feel a little bit unruly, but it has pushed my DPM up to 4048, which means I now have a base reload of 6.82 seconds, and obviously the rest of that is the same. And in terms of my mobility, I now have a 609 horsepower engine, 27.4 power to weight, which is very fast indeed. I can go 89.17 kilometers an hour forward, 35.34 kilometers an hour backwards, which is fantastic if you can manage to use that horrible 5 degrees of gun depression on ridge lines. My whole traverse is now 44 degrees a second, and my turret traverse is shot up to 45.89 degrees a second, so it is a very, very mobile tank. And I also now have a 573 meters view range, which can be very useful indeed, combining that with that very nice still concealment rating. In terms of the raw statistics, it doesn't look too bad at all, and if we have a look at the DPM of this tank compared to every single light tank in Era 2, I've highlighted it here in orange. You can see that it is kind of halfway basically. Here I've coloured it in green. This is the tanks using their multiple weapon system and combining the DPMs of their primary and their ATGMs, and you can see that they absolutely outshone every other tank in terms of their DPM, because that multiple weapon system where you can switch between your primary gun and your ATGMs just by holding down the ammo select button is absolutely insane and extremely powerful, and it always kind of makes these tanks a little bit OP in my opinion. Very fun to play. My favourite tank is the MX-13 SS11 TCA, but it's extremely powerful with that DPM. So if you kind of ignore the DPM of those tanks and you're looking at it like this, in terms of the premium Era 2 tank, light tanks, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not the best, it's definitely not the worst, it's just a bit meh. And 3491.4 DPM isn't too bad, and obviously if you use my commander and equipment setup and you boost that to just over 4,000 DPM at 4048, it shouldn't be too bad at all. So now we're going to get stuck straight into the gameplay, having a look at 3 games in this tank to see how it performs, and I'll talk you through why or whether I think this tank is worth it or not. So you join me here on Fisherman's Bay in the Type 63 HG90 in the first gameplay of today's video, and for the purposes of the rest of this video I'll be calling this the Type 63 because I really can't be asked to say its whole name. And before I get talking about how I like to play this tank in general and how I'm playing it in the gameplays in the background, I want to discuss a couple of different ways you might want to set up this tank. If you've watched the start of this video, and if you haven't yet, I'll timestamp this so you can go back and re-watch. I'll have talked about my commander and equipment setup and how I've used both pieces of mobility equipment, and the reasoning for that being I want to get the most out of the unique selling point of this tank. Wargaming in the article about this tank I've obviously written about the mobility, so that's how they're trying to sell this tank, and it is extremely mobile. You have a fantastic horsepower, you have a fantastic power to weight ratio, you have a very fast forwards and backwards top speed, and that's kind of what I've just wanted to boost up, and I've boosted that alongside my concealment because it does have a very nice concealment rating, even though you are a very large profile, long, light tank, and if you use foliage correctly, use your concealment rating to your advantage, you can still play that role and get the most out of this tank by trying to boost up your assistance and getting your silver and your XP that way. Other ways you might want to play this tank is to remove one piece of the mobility equipment, and if you did that I would suggest taking off the advanced powertrain. The reasoning for that being that it does give you a 5% boost to your overall top speed and your horsepower, but it doesn't help with your traverse speeds, and I think the traction system would help with your traverse speeds. And the reason I want to talk about traverse speeds with this tank is because even though it is very nimble, you are very long, and if people auto-aim they can still shoot you if you're circle strafing them and get lucky, even with the sort of server lag and that kind of thing sometimes. So you might want to consider just keeping the traction system to improve your traverse speeds, and maybe investing in something like the advanced loader to improve your DPM and play more like a damage dealing light tank or a sort of medium tank light tank hybrid, which you've seen me talk about before in my videos, and that's a very good way to play this tank. That's how I like to play this. If I don't get any assistance off the bat, I like to go in, support my tanks and play a kind of medium tank playstyle with this single shot 105mm gun. I'll just pause for this moment because I have a very enjoyable ram and subsequent shot taking out that armadillo, which is always really enjoyable. But yeah, you might want to improve your DPM that way, and if you choose to take off the traction system as well, because you feel like the mobility is absolutely perfect for you. You could invest another equipment slot into something else that you feel is going to help you a little bit more. Maybe you like to snipe a bit more, and you could use the enhanced zoom, or the advanced targeting, I think it's called. I'm pretty sure you can get that on this tank. If you can't, there's plenty of other options to sort of dabble around with, but this is just my recommendation for the tank. And in terms of commander skills and how else you might want to improve your playstyle with this tank, I've chose to use 2 of the concealment perks and also a lot of the gun handling perks, because of the dispersion on the move I felt isn't great. I felt like if I wasn't aiming in sort of 3/4 to full, I wasn't hitting a lot of my shots, especially snapshots, and as a light tank I'd want to hit as many shots on the move as possible when I'm trying to go in and circle tanks at the end and that kind of thing, or when I'm shooting or moving, getting into position. You might want to consider taking something else on your commander, something that maybe improves your traverse speeds, like the clutch braking would help with your mobility, so that can be in conjunction with you tweaking your equipment. But that's just something to think about if you want to get this tank, and how you might want to set it up. So in terms of this gameplay, you saw me go to the middle at the start of this battle on Fisherman's Bay, try and get some early assistance damage off. We have got a little bit in this battle, but the rest of it has been direct damage, and that's what I've been finding with this tank. Unless you are on a favourable map and you get a good bush, you'll usually find that smaller tanks will out assist you. So in that game in particular, we finished with a 2nd class medal. We finished 3rd on the leaderboard with 1166 XP, 2 kills, 5.2k direct damage and 1000 assistance, making a nice profit of 313,000 silver. So that's it for this game in the Type 63. We're going to head on now into the second gameplay, and I'll talk you through how I play that one. Right then, you're joining me here on El Alamein in the second gameplay of today's video in the Type 63 HG90, and like the last battle, we're going to head towards the centre of the map to start this game, try and get some vision out, spotting the enemies coming from their spawn towards the north of the map, and then we can relocate with our mobility later on in the battle and try and get some shots in with our 105mm gun. I'm going to try and get some support fire in throughout this gameplay. It's going to be quite awkward because a lot of the large ridge lines that is on El Alamein, but we're trying to do our best by using high ground like we're doing here, or wedging our tank up, something like that. And that's kind of how you have to play on maps like this, unless you are flanking or you're circling tanks and going in a sort of one-on-one engagement, that kind of thing. But before I get talking about the gameplay in particular, I want to talk a little bit more about Era 2 light tanks in general, especially the premium variety, and how competitive this tank is compared to them. So as a 105mm single fire gun and a pretty decent view range, concealment rating and mobility, you'd think that this is very, very competitive. And although it might have been the case before the multiple weapon system was introduced, it isn't the case now, because of tanks that have the ability to use the multiple weapon system. Tanks like this that are a single fire gun just are completely undergunned and underpowered. You'll see when I talked through the DPM of the Era 2 light tanks at the start of this video, and if you want to go back, I'll timestamp this video so you can. You'll see that all of the ones that were highlighted in green, we have the best DPMs in Era 2 in terms of light tanks, were the ones that could use the multiple weapon system. So tech tree tanks like the BMP line, and then you have tanks like the AMX-13, SS-11 TCA and the Cobra Arctic Hiss that can use the ATGMs alongside their primary gun. And because you can switch between the primary gun and the ATGMs just by holding down the ammo select button, they essentially have a DPM where you add the DPM of their primary gun to their ATGM DPM, and you get an astronomical DPM with fantastic firepower. And it just means that those tanks are so much more competitive than a tank like this, which is just a single fire gun. And you're going to probably do a lot better in tanks like that, because they are, for the most part, smaller profile, slightly worse mobility, but a very good concealment, often better than this tank. And if you learn to flank and play that light tank role where you're flanking, getting behind enemies, using your mobility to sort of circle strafe them, then you're going to have better games in tanks like that, because the firepower is just so much better. For the average to experienced player, if you like playing light tanks, then by all means you're going to have good games in this tank. It's not absolutely god awful, but it's definitely not as good as a lot of other era 2 light tanks, and especially the ones that can use the multiple weapon system. So if you want to part with your hard-earned cash, I would probably recommend waiting for when this tank gets cheaper. If you want to get this tank in particular, I'm sure at the future it will be on sale, or it will be an earn-up, or it will be offered to you or something like that. There'll be a reason you can probably pick this up in the future. And if you want a tank just for its uniqueness, or this tank I should say, for the look of it, then just go to the tech tree and grind out the Type 63 HG in the Eastern Alliance tech tree. And if you want that boat looking tank, you could always go to World War II and pick yourself up a Top 2. But yeah, the skin does look very nice, and if you do want to pick this tank up and you want the skin with it, don't get one of the bundles, get the base tank or the tank on its own, and go to the appearance tab and get the skin from there. This water dragon skin is 3,000 gold, I believe, and it will save you a little bit of money. But yeah, my opinion, and I'll tell you it now on whether this tank is worth it or not. It's not worth it. It's not as competitive as a lot of the other Era 2 premium light tanks. It is unique and it can be a lot of fun to play, but if you're looking for a competitive tank at a good price, then this isn't the one for you. Having said that, you can still have some pretty good games in it and have a single fire gun and not have to worry about the multiple weapon system. For some players that might be a little bit easier, but for the most part you're going to have better games in other light tanks. So in this game on El Alamein, you saw me come here at the start of the battle. I then dropped back to get some flanking shots into the WZ-122s, and now I've come back to this position and I've just been using my mobility to try and get flanking shots on the opponents. You'll see that on ridgelines like this it can be awkward to use the 5 degrees of gun depression, but then it is useful to have this mobility to get around the battlefield and go to where the damage is. You'll see here that I come up trying to get a shot into this WZ-122. Because of the terrible gun depression, my tank jumps up. I'm going too fast, so I probably didn't wait long enough for the gun to settle back down, and I missed a shell. I've done that plenty of times in this tank already. Little bumps in the ground can jolt your gun upwards, and also your turret traverse. Sometimes if you're using the handbrake, then yeah, it means that you're going to be missing shells because your turret doesn't sort of keep up with how you have stopped your tank using the handbrake. But for the most part, the mobility is very useful, especially like now where it's just one tank alive on the enemy team. It's the M113. My plan was, with my 572 hit points, to get a shell into this M113 and finish him off with a ram, because he is also a very lightly armoured tank indeed. Unfortunately, we are unable to dodge that shell there, even with the slow shell velocity that those HE or heat rounds have on that M113. He takes a shot, he puts a shot into us, meaning that we have to take one. We are then a one shot. We get one into him, but we didn't get there in time for the ram. And that's it for that battle, but I just wanted to get a little bit extra out of that game and maybe get a cool ram at the end. You can ram tanks, lightly armoured tanks in the Type 63 because of your speed, and when you're ramming things like an armadillo like you saw in the first gameplay, it can be very fun, but don't ram anything heavier than a very lightly armoured light tank. So that's it for that second game, where we finish with a second class medal. We are second on the team with 1,289 base experience, 3 kills, 5.4k direct damage, 1,200 assistance, and 313,000 silver profit. So that's it for that one. We're going to head over now into the third and final gameplay of today's video. So you're joining me here on Chaobang in the third and final gameplay of today's video. This is an assault game mode. We are assaulting the enemy, and on this map I'm going to go straight down the middle along this sort of ravine or river, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to try and get some vision out towards the north of the map and try and catch some of the enemy getting into position. Unfortunately for us, we clipped that building there, so we come up here and we're going to try and still get some view range out. We managed to outspot that medium tank on the opposite flank, which is no surprise, but we also got the spot for ourselves, and the BMP was below us, showing you that this tank does have good view range and concealment. And here is our first contender. This is, I believe, one of my subs. It's Total Trapanair. It is in this Arctic Hiss. I wasn't sure who this was at the start of this battle. We managed to sort of catch him with his pants down there a little bit, and unfortunately for him, he tried to evade us by getting out of the way, went up that hill, but we got 2 shots into him, but we had to fall back because we were taking enemy fire. You saw at the start of this battle that I was behind the BMP-2 that was getting into position, but we actually caught up with him, and we would have overtaken him if it wasn't for my really bad driving. And you're seeing me here come down, and I'm choosing to sort of sit out in the open in front of that Object 934 because I knew that I can kind of beat him in a gunfight, and also he was distracted. But you want to be careful about what sort of light tanks and other tanks that you go about going on one after, like 1v1, because if you're choosing the wrong target, like something that has 80 GMs like that Sheridan, or like something that can use the multiple weapon system, you can take a nasty bit of damage. We were out too long in the open there, and that Sheridan got an 80 GM into us. We were side on to him as well, so he had this long boat hold to shoot, and there was no way he was going to miss that, so we took a massive chunk of damage at the start of the battle, so we're going to have to try and play a little bit more sensibly for the rest of it. But we started this battle pretty well with 478 assistance, spotting assistance, now make that 1,275 spotting assistance and 2,897 direct damage. You can see here that I'm angling my tank up to get some view range out, as well as keeping my hull as hidden as best as possible in that bush. And now we're going to try and get some shots into this WZ-122. We track him as he turns there. Unfortunately he repairs, because that would have been some more assistance for us, but we're just going to stick in this position and get shots in where we can. You're seeing here that the gun handling can be a little bit derpy if it's not fully aimed. Fortunately that one into that Object 934 went in. This tank is a lot better than the Object 934, so, you know, if you are comparing those two like we did at the start, then I would probably recommend this tank over it, even though that can use 80 GMs. But compared to a lot of the other tanks, this is, yeah, it's inferior, like we discussed in the last gameplay. So that sort of cleared out the middle here. We got some assistance fire on tanks that were fighting over here on the sort of 8-9 line here in the eastern side of the map. I'm just waiting for this light tank who is behind me and the medium tank to come and sort of assist me, and then we're going to try and go after this FE4211 who is in front of us. You can see here that I was umming and ahhing whether to go over and try and get a shot into that FE4211, but with our gun depression we'd be exposing too much of our tank for too long, and with the gun handling on that tank he would have just snapped us, and we haven't got any armour to shout about at all. That's probably one thing that I should have mentioned at the start, but we haven't got any armour in this tank. It's extremely thin. You're going to get overmatched by pretty much every gun that you come across, so yeah, I just don't recommend taking any shots if you can help it, and just using the mobility to get out of the way. Unfortunately, as we go in to assist our tank there, taking on the I think it's the M60A1 there, he gets taken out, which means that as we are escaping we do eat a shell into this massive rear of this tank, and this is where this sort of mobility doesn't even help you because of the massive profile of this tank. There's instances like that where you probably would have escaped if you were a smaller tank, or a shorter tank I should say. But now we're going to rejoin with our team because we're all on our own there against a tank with similar DPM and better armour and more hit points. So we're going to join up with our team here, see if we can take out this FE4211. Then I'm going to join, or try and take my team over the other side of the map, ping where the enemy was last spotted, and we can go and take him out. But we're staying hidden here. There's no need for me to get spotted in this position. Although that FE4211 is detected, I didn't want to take the risk of him turning his gun around and snapping onto us. So we get a couple of shots in there. You see the penetration is very nice for going through the FE4211, which is always very nice. And now I'm asking for help from my team because I know where the enemy M60A1 is, and the enemy heavy I'm sure was in a similar location, but it looks like our team want to cap. We're going to be able to cap regardless, unless the enemies were on the way as I left them. So we're going to go hunting for the enemies even if we don't manage to get any more damage in, and if we get taken out, it just means that we're distracting the enemies for a bit longer so that we definitely win by cap. But I was kind of hoping that our team wouldn't cap this out. There's still 12 seconds left, and I'm just going to come in with this light tank, see if we can get any more shots in. Unfortunately, it doesn't look that way. That M60A1 has long gone. God knows where he's went. Unfortunately, that game is capped out by our team. I mean, it's still a win, but we could have done a little bit more with that game. But that's kind of how the games have been going in this tank. We finished MVP for once in this tank with a 3rd class medal, 1,104 base experience points, 1 kill, 5.4k direct damage, 1,275 assistance, 436,000 silver profit. That's with a ×2 booster or ×1.5, I believe. It might not. Well, that doesn't sound right. But either way, these are kind of typical games that you're going to be having with this tank. Like 5.4k direct damage or 1,275 assistance isn't anything astronomical for an Era 2 light tank. I mean, I think it was 12 or 13k in the AMX13 SS11 just the other day, and you know, that's almost 3 times as much as this, and I'm averaging kind of like between 5 and sort of 8k damage in that tank, whereas with this tank it's sort of ranging between sort of 4 and 5k, just sort of showing you that the firepower is lacking compared to some of the other Era 2 premium light tanks. But that's it for this review. I hope you found it useful and or entertaining. Thank you all so much for all of your support. We're nearing 1,000 subs, and when we do, there will be a nice big celebration and a giveaway. But that's it for today's video. I hope you all have a great weekend, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.